Since the age of 10, Kyla, an abandoned foster care child, has been living on the streets. And every month like clockwork, she is faced with a difficult decision. Will she buy the box of tampons that she needs, or will she purchase her next meal? If Kyla is unable to pay for the menstrual product she needs, she is then forced to make her own period products out of unhygienic items, such as a sock or a plastic bag. This method of menstrual hygiene puts Kyla at a high risk for a multitude of diseases and infections. Kyla is one of the many women around the globe who are victims of period poverty. Period poverty is a term used to describe the lack of access that disadvantaged women, men, and non-binary people have to proper menstrual hygiene products. Up to 500 million people across the world are surviving under conditions wherein access to menstrual hygiene products is scarce. Having a period every month can be an untenable expense, especially if you live in a country or state where buying the feminine hygiene products needed to prevent numerous health issues is taxed because the products are considered a luxury item. According to the International Federation of Gynecology, an estimated 1 in 10 young women have been unable to afford protection for their period. 12% have been forced to improvise with devices that may be ineffective, unhygienic, and unsafe. Incarcerated women in particular have an especially hard time gaining access to menstrual hygiene products. Chandra Bolzecco, a previous inmate at York Correctional Institution in Connecticut, had to plead with her correctional officer for pads. Chandra recalled an experience with a CO to Women's Health magazine and stated, "You'd ask a CO for pads or tampons and he would ask you questions like, 'How long have you been bleeding? Didn't I give you a pad yesterday? How long is this one going to last?'" Despite it being a federal law to provide female inmates with menstrual products, there have been countless stories from women all across the US who have had to beg and barter for period supplies. An especially horrifying case of poverty in prisons was Coral Martin's experience in San Luis Obispo County Jail. During one of her monthly cycles, Coral had soaked through all of the pads that she had been provided. Coral had been arrested at the young age of 19 during an episode of psychosis, and her mental state was quickly declining due to the fact that the jail refused her prescribed medications. Because there was no room in the county's one psychiatric facility, Coral was placed in an isolation unit without any menstrual products. Eventually, Coral was found naked in her own cell and covered in her own blood. The treatment Coral received was inhumane and animalistic. The county had access to menstrual products to give to their inmates, but the COs, hardened by the systematic mistreatment of their female inmates and own ignorance, did not believe Coral needed any menstrual products. It is hard and painful to accept that this type of mistreatment surrounding menstrual hygiene is so prevalent in the American incarceration system, but it is necessary to begin to have a conversation about this subject in order to spark a change. We have to begin to see these people as human beings rather than cold-hearted criminals that we have become desensitized to. Additionally, women are not the only ones who experience this hardship. Period poverty affects men and gender non-conforming individuals as well. Our society has become conditioned to believe that menstruation assumes an individual's gender, but that is inaccurate. When taking into account that transgender people are more likely to live in poverty than a cisgendered person, it becomes easier to realize how period poverty affects all kinds of people. In a recent US transgender survey conducted by Hank Leeton, it was discovered that trans individuals are more than twice as likely to live in poverty and 3 times as likely to be unemployed as the general population. Further, in the few cases that menstrual products are provided for free in public restrooms, menstruating individuals who prefer to use a male restroom are less likely to have access to these free menstrual items. Similarly, if a women's shelter is capable, they may provide women with 1 to 2 individual feminine hygiene products for her cycle, but trans homeless men are unlikely to be provided with feminine hygiene products in a male homeless shelter. As a society, we must begin to take the steps required in order to provide all individuals with proper access to menstrual hygiene products. An item as essential as toilet paper should not carry the burden of such negative and inhumane stigmas, so much so that we are afraid or embarrassed to address the immense amount of problems that have been overlooked surrounding the topic of menstrual hygiene. In my own community, I have established a club called Helping Women Period. Together, my club raised over $600 in its first year and collected over 5,000 menstrual hygiene products that were donated to the Shalom House in Harrisburg. While my club has benefited a lot of people, I know donations are not enough. First, we must begin to educate the next generation. For centuries, periods have been seen as a shameful topic that we've ought to be kept a secret. In many countries, women and girls are unallowed from touching water, cooking, or attending religious ceremonies while menstruating because the individual is seen as unclean. These ideas ingrain shameful thoughts regarding menstruation into young girls' minds. Especially in developing countries like Uganda, girls are less likely to attend school to receive an education while menstruating because they fear being teased or ridiculed. Even here in the US, it is common for girls to learn to hide their menstrual products in a little bag to take to the restroom with them while in public spaces, like school. If health curriculums in school focused more on having open conversations about menstruating individuals' reproductive health, menstrual hygiene, and their human rights, we can re-divert whatever shame a student may have and teach them to celebrate their bodies, and further, empower the next generation to have a sense of bodily independence and pride. Period poverty isn't a political issue. It is a humanitarian crisis. It is a societal question whether we treat our brothers and sisters with respect and dignity, or whether we leave them to continue to live in shame and dangerous conditions. Thank you.